Ladies and gentlemen, do you see this man? This is Bob Greaves, the unconventional pastor, and in just a moment, he's going to put you through hell. Stay tuned. It's going to be an experience you'll never forget.
Well, good evening, and here we are. It looks like we got that music still running there. But anyway, here we are again on another Wednesday night, and I'm really tired. It's been a busy week. I had tests to get back to students, and some students who weren't there to get it, and so I had to get other students. Anyway, but it seems like I got comments already. Let's see what we have here. Sorry, it wasn't broadcasting music only to you. Okay, well, that's the way that goes. Okay. Hey, we just continue on what we're doing. I'm exhausting. I am, Anyhow, I've been busy, but I was reading this book, and I've read a number of books on theology, some that I like, some that I didn't, and I actually worked on a book on theology. Floyd Berrickman put a book together called Practical Theology, and when was putting it together, I was actually an office manager at the print shop where he had that book put together. We did the typesetting and all that. And I'm the one who actually did the estimating of how much it was going to cost him to have us make the book for him. And he gave me a signed copy of the book after it was done. Practical Theology was its title. And he got the title from his Bible school, which was Practical Bible Training School, which was the second oldest Bible institute in the United States of America, and he was a teacher there. Anyway, most of these books on theology when I read them, as you know, I'm the unconventional pastor. I really don't buy into these theologies, and many of them are really poorly written. They're not, they're not good philosophy, not good logic. Many times, even not strong biblical interpretation. But I got to tell you something. Although I disagree strongly with this book in most of its, well, maybe even all of its statements, I got to say that I find this to be one of the absolute best books on theology if you wanted as educated a position as you could get on a fundamentalist or evangelical view of theology. Norman L. Geisler, Systematic Theology in one volume. There's a lot in here, and he really does what I think is a very thorough job in discussing various issues and trying to present what would be, in my opinion, some of the best possible arguments one could offer for some of the traditional beliefs, so that I'm sure it's going to become a very popular book. I'm not sure when it was brought out. Remember, I was browsing through books in the Christian bookstore when I found it, and that's what made me pick it up. It wasn't cheap either. Let's see, I'm looking for a date inside here. Original copyright date is 2002, and the latest update was 2011, so it's rather recent. A Systematic Theology. Anyway, so if you're interested in having something that's a resource to show you a good example, if you can, I got to be honest with you. When you're going to be critical of someone else's theology, it's very easy to be critical of that theology by finding somebody who's a particularly bad example of it, and then you can criticize the bad example. Criticizing a good example of theology you disagree with is not as easy, but it's a little more honest, I think. And so I've been reading through this book at various different times, and in between gasps and what have you, trying to make sense of it. But recently I was reading through this, and it was he was talking about some of the concepts of hell. And I've read a number of books and various articles about hell from various different people who are trying to talk about whether or not it's biblical or what it's going on. And of course, we're dealing with the translations here that are translated according to traditions in a manner where they're really seeking to uphold those traditions, and it's not always easy to determine what's really wrong with the translations if you're just some ordinary person and reading the Bible. And if you're going to believe what it says, you're going to be pretty much taught a great number of things about hell. In some ways, I think I find some of those books interesting. In some ways, I find them to be simply a different point of view of how to translate and understand Scripture, but using almost the exact same kind of mentality about the text that the traditionalists use when trying to teach hell. And I don't think that always works so well, because not always at least the way that the English is translated, does it always work so well to just simply try to say, well, it means something entirely different. I don't think it always works. But I would also say that if there's one thing that I think makes it very clear, at least it does to me, that Jesus was not here for the purposes of fulfilling Judaism and starting an entirely new religion. It's sometimes the way that we've used this concept of hell. Was it Purcell? I think it was the fellow who was once on my one of my programs, who wrote that book, Christianity Without Insanity or something. I think it was something like that. And he talked about the concept of hell and how it is just in so many ways illogical and irrational. And I think that we need to stop to ask ourselves, to what degree do we trust our own thinking? Now, many Christians want to tell you we shouldn't trust our own thinking at all. They want you to lean entirely on God. And I find this to be kind of a crazy idea because it strikes me as being internally inconsistent. For example, sometimes they'll tell you, God's ways are not our ways and his thoughts are not our thoughts. That's why you have to listen to God. Well, if God's thoughts are not our thoughts and his ways are not our ways, then when he tells us what his thoughts are and when we see what his ways are, we won't understand them, So what good does that do? What makes you think that just because you have a certain sense from the text, that you have the right text and the right sense of that text? That just strikes me as being nothing but an excuse that works to justify the fact that I don't have to think independently or for myself. Not that any of us have all of the skills necessary to make sense of everything in reality. I don't think any of us really do. And in fact, that's part of my argument. Nobody possesses those skills. And if nobody possesses that sort of skills, I don't see how those sort of skills could be required for you to make a reasonable decision about your eternity. That's just illogical. It's radically inappropriate, unfair, unjust. And so there comes a point in time where I think that people have to take, in my opinion, full responsibility for what it is they believe. There's none of this, the Bible says it, I believe it, that settles it. Okay, the Bible is saying certain things. You understand it to mean certain things. You have to accept full responsibility for what it is you accept as what you understand its meaning to be. And if you can't accept full responsibility for that, I don't think you have all that right to be pushing that on somebody else in any manner. But this question of hell really brings up a number of problems that gets us to wonder about even the purpose of religious movements and religious sects in the first place, because it is in many ways a fantasy of vindication. It is in some ways, many times we find people talking about how God says, vengeance is mine. and that this is supposedly a way of us not taking vengeance into our own hands. And yet it's amazing. This same crowd that gives us these verses that tell us that vengeance is mine, says the Lord, is a crowd of people who were apparently commanded by God to take a great deal of vengeance out on a great number of people. When you think about it, the nation of Israel was supposedly, according to the story of the text of this book, um, according to this text, how were they to become a nation? They were slaves in Egypt. They come out of Egypt. They wander for 40 years because of their own disobedience and because of the problems they're having in really trusting and believing God. And then these people, having all these problems, believing and trusting God, without a country, are now commanded to go in and commit an ethnic cleansing of a land. Probably not even prepared to understand this. Now, I don't think that this actually historically happened, to be honest with you, but this is the story, and they're commanded by God to do this. And people will say, well, God is just, and these people were under the ban, and they had worshipped false gods, and they were reprobate and unredeemable. Well, you know what? If vengeance is mine, says the Lord, it seems to me the only consistent thing for God to do is that if he wanted them dead, he should have gone in there and killed them himself. To take people who are imperfect and, by the way, apparently without a country, and have them be the ones responsible for going in and getting rid of all those people, that strikes me as being kind of odd. Doesn't that sound like a story that justifies a national identity? And by the way, like I say, I have my doubts as to the real veracity of the historical nature of this story. I think that that this is a story that was developed as a way of explaining why they needed to get rid of the foreigners that were in their land. How they actually came to that land, I'm not entirely really sure. It's not really clear to me, but they wanted to get rid of the other foreigners. And this story certainly justified that. It'd be kind of like, what if I could start a new religion and come down from the mountain with some tablets and then tell you that God wants us to get rid of all those illegal aliens, and we're just going to ethnically cleanse the place. We're not going to send them back to Mexico or Cuba or wherever they come from. We're just going to kill them. Men, women, children. They got any dogs, cats, we'll kill them too. They got any property or gold? All depends on what the mood is at the time, but I suppose we'll just have to bury it all or give it to the collection. You can send it to me. I'll take all the gold. Yeah, that'll work. Or send it to the administration I set up for your worship. When do we raise our eyebrow and wonder what the motives might be of self-service behind such a story? I think that we have to accept at least the reality that such an accusation could be made, and at best maybe even saying, well, I realize it can look that way, and I don't blame you for thinking that, but I really think that they were wicked, they were evil, they were under the ban, and we had to kill them, or whatever. I don't know, but it strikes me as being something. We have an entire story here, where a great deal of evil is not only permitted but commanded to be done to people who happen to be one's enemies. And I really see this concept of hell as being a hope deferred of vengeance. I would like to see all my enemies end up in hell, and I'd really personally like to put them there. But I'll tell you what, I'll be righteous and I'll be good and I'll be an example of holiness, and God will put my enemies in hell for me, and they'll suffer there forever and ever and ever and ever. There's something about this concept that strikes me as being very powerfully us versus them. So the truth is, I'm not even really concerned about finding biblical and textual reasons for interpreting this in some other way. Although I will definitely agree with many of these books that have been written that the concept has been greatly exaggerated through translation, that it's been greatly abused and brought upon us in a manner that is not an honest declaration from the text. But at the same time, be it as it may, I personally don't care. That's moot to me. We need to accept the concept, the thinking, the logic, and the psychology and the reality of the sociology of this entire concept, and recognize it for what it is: an extremely self-serving, self-centered solution to the eternity of us versus them. And to me, we need to start taking responsibility for the way that it soothes that sense of us versus them in a way that I find morally reprehensible. And I mean that. I mean that I think that that we'll find that the concept of hell, when it's embraced by certain people, is actually a concept that morally corrupts the person who holds it. Their sense of justice, their sense of mercy, their sense of redemption is in many ways, I think, corrupted by their willingness to accept such a concept. It just at least I think they need to answer to the charge that's what it looks like. That's what it seems like. But anyway, going through this book, which I was doing, the Norman L. Geisler book. There you go. I was reading some of the things there about what he's saying about hell, and of course, it shouldn't be a surprise. He certainly believes in it, upholds the doctrine, but he believes that God's justice demands hell, and he talks in here that some of the reasons for this are that although we look at some of the that his justice demands hell, that God is eternal, and consequently to sin against him is to sin against his eternal qualities, and so therefore this is why hell must be eternal. And as I think about that, I'm thinking, what possible relevance or connection does the entity that is supposedly sinned against, what possible connection do those qualities have with what's an appropriate response to the person who did the sinning? I don't get it. To me, the connection doesn't even exist. I mean, that is to say, like, if I steal $1 from some poor idiot down around the corner, well, that's bad. But if I steal $1 from a very, very important person, oh my goodness, well, then we really need to punish me. Oh yeah? Is that the way it works? Is this there's kind of like a classism going here? Not to say that God would be no different than any other person, but I got the ways in which we may fall short. I don't think most people start out thinking, I'm going to do this to God. It doesn't work that way. And so this kind of logic, in my opinion, is merely trying to find the best way of spinning the story to be able to find at least what seems like a coherent reason for sticking with the tradition. We certainly can't give it up. And it makes me wonder, to what length of lack of logic, lack of honesty, and lack of genuine care does a person have to what degree do they have to go to in order to still sustain and maintain this horrific idea and teaching? Love demands hell, he says in his book here, that, the Bible shows that God is love, and love cannot be coercive, but rather is persuasive, and God cannot force people to love him. And so because of the nature of love being what it is, those who just aren't going to be won over by it they just are going to have to be eternally damaged and tortured forever. So because God's love kind of demands it, God's sovereignty demands a hell. Here he also says, if there were no hell, there would be no final victory over evil. Oh, so this is something about winning and losing, that's interesting. If God supposedly, according to most traditional theology, is in need of nothing, then he doesn't need a victory either. I suppose if God really needed nothing, for him to just simply turn his back would be sufficient. But there's this still an attempt to spin the story in a manner. This is at least the way I'm seeing it. There's this need to continue to spin the story. And part of what I'm asking here tonight is this. I'm deliberately avoiding looking at some of the scriptural arguments here because I'm trying to appeal to something here. I'm asking you, when do you stop to say, does this really make sense? When do you stop to say, am I going to take a tradition that has been handed down to me that began thousands of years ago, and I'm still going to hold on to it and defend it without ever really seriously giving it some honest questions? When are you going to do that? There comes a time when you have to realize this is outrageous. This is insane. God's sovereignty here supposedly demands hell. Human depravity demands hell. Now, here's something where I think that this shows the power of tradition. In fact, the only way to really justify the doctrine of hell is you've got to make this horrific teaching somehow seem just. And the only way to make it just is to truly intensify the level of guilt that belongs to, appropriately assignable to mankind, in order to justify this. And so this is one of the reasons why depravity makes so much sense. But I got to ask you, do you think these people love people? Do you think they have any respect for human beings? Do you think that they have stopped to genuinely understand how precious and how full of treasure human beings really are as an existence? There are fellow creatures. To what degree can you actually take a look at the struggles and the difficulties that human beings are having, and then decide you will settle into the conclusion, oh, I know why human beings have so many problems. It's because deep down inside, they're just totally depraved and hell-worthy. Gotta be honest with you. I'm under the impression that we as a culture, as a society, as a race, have not yet been willing to get down to brass tacks and honest about what it is we really need for healthy, proper development. And that part of the reason why we've had trouble getting there is, well, all of us would like life to be simpler than it really is. I can understand why we would like that, but sorry, responsibility someday has to kick in and tell us life is what it is, and we have to rise to the challenge. It is an opportunity that we need to face and embrace. But on top of that is this dragging weight that's holding us down, a monkey on our back, as it were. That's this belief held on to by a great majority of people that somehow people are worthy of hell for having failed to either come to Christ or be good, or whatever the reasons are that people who believe in this hell give. Now, most evangelicals and fundamentalists will say, no, it's the blood of Christ. It's completely a gift of grace. Nobody ever really deserves anything but hell. But there are other people who still believe in hell, who have this concept that, well, you're going to die, and God's going to say, well, were you good? Were you bad? He's going to weigh you in the balances and say, you go to hell. And that's the way it's going to be. But to justify this kind of thinking cannot happen without there being some axiomatic, basic hatred for human nature, a disgust of self and a disgust of other selves. There's something about that I think that really needs to be taken a look at. Is it even really possible to embrace this kind of a doctrine unless you're willing to accept that that is the basic explanation for why human beings have the problems and troubles they have? Because deep down inside, they're basically depraved, worthless pieces of crap. Now, I think we have to ask ourselves, you know, don't we see enough examples of how when people are treated in a denigrating way, that it often causes them to embrace the attitude of their abusers, and they begin thinking of themselves in the way that their abusers have thought of them, and they find that that's what makes sense to them, particularly if they are diminutively beholding to their abusers. And I would say that Western culture, and the world for that matter, has been the abused victim of a great deal of extremely coercive and abusive religions. And that therefore, it's really important for us to take a different look. Now, I don't think that we have to necessarily go in the direction of where the atheist has gone. I'm a believer. I believe in Jesus, but I certainly don't believe that Jesus had anything to do with this garbage. I really don't. I don't see that. I see him as somebody who came to kind of be a stick in the eye, a real problem to these traditions, and as really provoking them in some ways. And actually, in some ways, having really, because he called on the issues that were so important, ended up really provoking his murder. Because of all the outrageous things that he found it necessary to speak up and out against. Anyway, so human depravity supposedly demands hell, but then he turns around in the next paragraph or the next section of his book. He talks about human dignity requires hell. Now, this is kind of a weird mixture to me that okay, so we have human beings who are so depraved that they deserve hell, but have so much dignity that hell is the only appropriate way of dealing with their depravity. This sounds to me like a real nice catch-22. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. I got you either way. You're between a rock and a hard place. If this isn't a setup for a double bind, I don't know what is. Now, a double bind, that's where you are put into a position where you are under the impression that you have only one of two options, both of which are terrible. And yet you have to make a stressful decision under that duress, and hope to minimize your distress and trouble in the process. That's a way of raising people who become neurotic and psychologically ill, giving them that kind of a double bind. And no wonder our culture struggles even the way we do, and other cultures struggle the way that they do. I was reading a speech by the Indian chief who defeated Custer. And the speech was interesting because, had the Indians won, I could have seen how this speech could have been one of the speeches that would rise to the occasion of demonstrating how awesome and righteous the Indians were and how evil the white man was. I'm not taking any side here, really, but when you look at the speeches of both sides are trying to fight what they see as great evil in the other side. Both sides are trying to rely upon those things they see as being the proper virtue. In fact, that speech given by the Indian chief there was one where he's talking about the great need to return to the earth and its value, and that he's longing for the day when the whole earth will be one in respect of its environment and in respect of this and that. And I thought the speech was in some ways just a wonderful speech. But, unfortunately, it was the speech, I guess, of the losers of that, of the overall battle, even though they won the battle there with Custer. But by the way, one thing I've decided to do, I've been asked to write books a couple of times. And I've wanted to, but at the same time, I've not liked any of the ideas that have come to me, or I'd be writing something really just to kind of put something out there. Oh, that's cool. I got a book, and to be honest with you, I just don't have that motivation. I did actually write something that I was hoping to turn into a book a number of years ago. It was destroyed in the flood of 2006. But after I wrote it, and then I wrote it, finished it, and then I went on vacation, came back, and the house was destroyed. Uh, uh, when I read it, though, it was way too obtuse, and I realized I was trying to write it mostly to uh, establish myself. And I suppose in some ways that was good, but that's not a good enough reason to sell a book, as far as I'm concerned. But I've been recently thinking in terms of some book that would really have genuine value and use, something that I could say, but that would also be something people would find meaningful and useful to read. And so I've actually come up with an idea, and tell me what you think of it. The idea is this: to write a book on understanding the self. As that struggle is represented and experienced by people who are coming out of some form of spiritual abuse. And so the title of the book might be something like this: Just Who Do You Think You Are? The Discovery of Self, uh, while in the process of recovery from spiritual abuse. So I'd really discuss the issue of discovering self, but in light of the particular and unique problems that are given to the person whose sense of self was something that actually set them up in a way to be victimized by an abusive religion, and then was further damaged by that abusive religion. And now that they've left it, a lot of those concepts and core ideas and core sense of self still remain. It takes a while. And how do you rebuild that without just, waiting for somehow for it to dissipate or go through years of therapy or whatever? So anyway, I'm thinking about writing that. I think that would be helpful and useful. That's something I could say, something I could write, and something I could see that would be useful. It wouldn't be a book I'd write just to kind of show how smart I am or something, which is just a stupid and useless reason. I also started writing another book called How to, Understanding and Managing Emotions. And I realized what I was doing is really trying to articulate my concepts and my theories on that topic. And as a result, it really would have only been useful as maybe an academic journal kind of thing, and, for other people who are dealing with those issues to think and consider. And as a result, it really didn't have much value to the average person, and I didn't like the way it was looking and the way I was writing it. It just struck me as being, I don't know, I didn't like it. I didn't think it was helpful. Help me, but that's not good enough for writing a book. Anyway, let me know what you think about that. Going back to this idea here, looking at the concept of hell, that human dignity was somehow going to be requiring it, and that he also talks about how the cross implies hell. And of course, Dr. Jones has addressed that very often, and as have I in our claims that Jesus was murdered. Jesus had some things to say that, if taken to heart, would really upset the apple cart, would really undo religion, and religion needed to be undone, and was a very dangerous thing. Of people who are very spiritual and yet not religious are difficult to control, and who knows, they can upset an awful lot of apple carts. And I really think that the Christian movement, as soon as it had an opportunity to become a movement, quickly decided to become more religious than spiritual, and so that we actually ended up rebuilding the very thing Jesus came to destroy through Christianity. But anyway, he continues on in this book, talking a little bit about hell. But then he gets into where he wants to talk about various objections to hell. And I find it interesting, some of the things he had to say in his book here about hell. Uh, Hold on, here, a viewer comment. I didn't notice this before. Viewer comment: Bob, your little mini skits on hell are hilarious, and they really frame the issue in a light that shows it for what it really is. Thanks. Okay. I don't know if you're talking about things I've done here. I have some YouTube videos out there that are just absolutely absurd, ridiculous, stupid, with me saying crazy, funny things, and some of them I was hoping that would end up being used as responses in forums to. But anyway, there's so. But thank you. I'm glad. I'm glad you're both entertained and informed. Anyhow, some of the objections that he wants to answer are objections you may have even heard, such as why punish people in hell? Why not reform them? You know, and of course, his answer is going to be that they can't be reformed. We've tried. Life is the opportunity for them to be reformed, and they rejected the opportunity to be reformed during life. And this sounds to me like a way of just trying to justify the end. Because think about it. In this world, who are the people telling you that hell is the danger of your future? Do these people who are preaching that, do they seem to have any corner on morality? Excuse me. Do they seem to have any corner on love? Are these people in whom the life of Christ within them is so amazing that it has revolutionized their lives, not just in the way they have said, but in the way that comes out? Look at all the scandals, the difficulties, the horrible things that are being done by people involved in the religious community. I'm not saying they're all that way, but one thing is absolutely clear. They, as a group of people, have not demonstrated themselves to be in any manner any better than the rest of us in any way. And in fact, statistically, there are some ways in which we might find that they are even worse, that people who believe in a strong, powerful religious certainty and who believe that the other people who don't join them in that are destined for a horrible eternal doom. These are often people who are far more guilty of a great number of things that other people who don't believe such things would never even consider doing. So that statistically, and so these people who have not been a model of love, a model of spirituality, a model of reality, these are the people giving you this message that you're supposed to believe. And I got to ask you, how could a message such as this be true coming from such a group as the people that it comes from? And how is it possible that God, as righteous, could ever possibly hold people to an account for whether or not they accepted or rejected a message that is not only unverifiable, but comes to them from people who don't really possess the sort of credibility you'd expect from a group of people bringing you this kind of a message? There comes time when, regardless of what that message is, regardless of what the text says, you got to step back and you got to say, now, hold on a second. Who's telling me this? And what sort of credibility do they possess in telling me this? And how could this possibly be so? So this spin here, why not reform them? In this question here, part of what we're getting is when we believe that they can't be reformed, to me, that is an ultimate sense of dismissiveness. They died without Christ. They're going to hell forever. They never could have been reformed. How convenient a way of just dismissing human beings. I don't think that they realize, the people who teach this concept of hell, I don't think they realize how extremely offensively dismissive this kind of a notion really ends up being. It's just not, it's not going to work. I want to make sure I keep my eye on the time here. Okay, so I'm going to put a clock up here where I can see it right there. Okay, cool. There's other objections that, and of course, there's some people who would say that, well, anybody who went to hell would be there and they'd want to change their mind. And of course, the response to that objection is, but there's no proof that somebody in hell would decide that once they were there, they don't want to be there. After all, look at the the rich man and Lazarus and that story there from Luke 16. He wants someone to go and tell his brothers, but he's not really personally asking to get out of there. That I think, first of all, it's abusing the story there, but it's like grasping at a straw that might seem like it builds up the argument, but suffering, sorry to say, is for many of us a wake up call, and for some people it inspires us to try even harder. But there does come a certain point in time where one realizes that it is futile to continue on, and you'd think that somewhere in all of eternity, a person could reach that point, and if they don't, what was God thinking when he created human beings with such a nature that could be a possible conundrum they end up in? That shows, I think, poor design, not intelligent design, to be honest with you. There's other objections that he tries to talk about. Isn't eternal damnation for temporal sins overkill? And here, of course, he says that upon closer examination, it turns out to be not only just, but necessary. And here's where he also talks about, so your sins may have been temporal, but they were against an eternal God. And so he justifies even that there, and that the alternative punishment is robbing persons of their freedom and forcing them into heaven. My goodness, what a horrible thing to do to people. It's kind of like, when we force our kids to go to school, or when we force them to, file their taxes, or when we, do other things that we might coerce certain people to do. That's, take their medicine. Some medicine isn't enjoyable to take, and it's very helpful and very necessary. But anyway, here again, I think it's really a grasping at straws. He talks about one here that I think is particularly revealing, at least to me it is. How can we be happy in heaven knowing that a loved one is in hell? He wants to defend this. He says, first of all, apparently God is going to be plenty happy. He represents God as a God who can create. And according to these people who believe in hell, the way they understand it is few there be who go through that narrow gate, and broad is the way that leads to destruction, and many are going in that particular way. So he's telling you that God is going to be absolutely eternally pleased, happy, and at ease with himself, even though the vast majority of his creation are lost. And I'm supposed to believe this about God when I see Jesus talking about, the 99 sheep and running out to get the one sheep. Oh, by the way, David Hayward had a great cartoon the other day. It's a cartoon of Jesus, I guess, bringing back a sheep, or a shepherd bringing back a sheep. And the sheep is saying, I don't think you understand. I'm trying to get away from the other 99. And but anyway, which I thought was funny. But can you imagine this, representing God as someone who's going to be happy in this, and then recommending that we kind of be like that, be like God, where we're going to just somehow find this extremely acceptable. I would wonder how one can find that acceptable, especially given the fact that according to the evangelical and fundamentalist doctrine, the way you get to heaven is not by your own works. You're no more deserving of it than they are deserving of heaven. You get to go there because you just happen to accept Jesus or something along those lines. And yet through this arbitrary thing that doesn't make you, evidently when you look at the morals of Christians, any different than anybody else, and you're going to be happy that you are the gracious recipient of this arbitrary gift, while others are just arbitrarily, they're out, and God is glorified by the total annihilation of them and his holiness upheld, and so how, Anyway, we have another viewer comment here that says that, traditional Christianity, fundamentalist stuff has no future. They used fear. Fear is the result of things unknown. I would, totally agree with that it is, uh, I don't think it has much of a future. And not when people are going to be. The only way they can have a future is if we keep people under a constant duress where they don't have a moment to sit back and really start to think and think it through and have the luxury of doing that. So if we can keep them under pressure and stress, we can keep them feeling like, oh my goodness, we better do this or God is going to destroy them, and we don't want God to destroy us because we love what we're doing, and we love this country and all that other stuff, So it'll continue by the fear mongers who feel that the stress and the pressure of everything requires that we get so busy protecting tradition that we don't have time to really think about it and question it. Anyway, there are other objections, like why would God create people that he knew was going to go to hell? And wouldn't it have been better if they had never been created? And here he makes an argument that existence is better than non-existence. I don't know. Well, he goes and he says, oh, well, even when Jesus said that better for that man that he had never been born, isn't that kind of an argument against that? And he wants to argue, well, that was just an expression. Oh, so are we now willing to admit that we're choosing which of Jesus' statements we're going to take as expressions and which we're going to take as literal? Maybe some of that stuff about hell was an expression, just maybe. So why are we choosing one or the other? I have no objection to the idea that Jesus was using expressions. I think he did. I think he used far more expressions than we're giving him credit for. Anyhow, I just in reading through this, I found it, and there's more here, that he talks about, such as the redeeming value of hell. Is it right to send people to hell when they're sinners by nature and we're born that way? Is it just, and here the concept of justice is a concept of justice that has no empathy for human beings. It only thinks of God, a person who, according to this theology, is unaffected and in need of nothing. And this one who is all in all and in need of nothing, even though he's in need of nothing, he gets everything and you get nothing. That sounds to me kind of like the same kind of mentality of, that exists in some abusive forms of capitalism, where we've made $100,000. I get $90,000. We'll distribute $10,000 among the other 100 employees. Why? I can do that. And, just this dismissive sense of what's appropriate and what's right, and then it ends up that we're trying to protect the honor and the glory of someone who supposedly can't lose any honor and glory no matter what happens. It just, in my opinion, it ends up being a story that, as far as I can tell, the story of hell is little more than an illusion and a fantasy that appeals to people who want to believe they're safe and want to believe that the enemies and the difficult people in their life are going to have some other comeuppance for them. And that this is some way of experiencing that as even the vindication of God. I mean, how wonderful would that be if God is really going to be good to you and he's going to be really bad to all those people who've been bad to you? That can make you feel pretty good, I guess. But I think it is really that sort of an appeal. Now, on the other hand, I do think that there's some people who hold on to this notion, not because they are holding on to this fantasy of ultimate vengeance, but they're holding on to it because they are those people who've been victimized to feel, oh my goodness, you're right. So in having been improperly abused, they're holding on to this, hoping that they are on the lucky side of it all. And too bad for all those other people, but sorry, that's just the way it's going to have to be. Anyway. That's my little ranting and raving about hell. thought I'd give you a little hell tonight, and I'll talk to you again on Sunday night. In the meantime, this is Bob Greaves, the Unconventional Pastor, and I'll see you later. Take care.
Ladies and gentlemen, that lecture was hell. I hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned. In just a moment, Dr. Jones is going to be up on stage speaking to you, and might be a little more hell to go. We hope you enjoy it. See you then.